The wind swept low over the Arizona plains, carrying the scent of dust and rain. The sun was melting behind the red cliffs, throwing long shadows across the land. A rider appeared from that glow, old, slow, and steady. His beard was silver, his back a little bent, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of a hawk. They called him Clayton Briggs, the old thunder of Texas. Once, long ago, he'd been the best rider and gunman west of the Rio Grande. But that was 20 years ago. Now he rode alone, his horse limping like its master, toward the Apache borderlands, a place few white men dared to ride anymore. He wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble, as always, found him. Clayton stopped at a dry creek and bent down to fill his canteen. That's when he saw it, smoke rising far in the east. Not campfire smoke. No, this was black, thick, wild. A village was burning. Without a second thought, the old cowboy pulled himself back in the saddle and kicked his horse forward. The animal groaned but obeyed. He rode like the wind itself had called his name. When he reached the ridge above the fire, his eyes hardened. Below, an Apache camp was under attack. A small group of white raiders, drunk and cruel, were shooting into the huts, laughing as women screamed. Clayton cursed under his breath. Damn fools! They'll start another war if I don't stop this. His hands, old as they were, still remembered what to do. In one motion he drew his rifle and took aim. One shot cracked through the air. A raider fell, then another, then another. From the chaos below, the Apache warriors looked up, confused at first. Then they saw him, a lone rider silhouetted against the firelight, picking off their enemies one by one with deadly precision. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. By the end of it, the raiders were either dead or running. Clayton rode down slowly, his gun still smoking. The Apaches stood ready, tense and suspicious. But before any could speak, one woman stepped forward. She was tall, proud, her face streaked with ash, but her eyes full of fire. Her name was Nayeli, daughter of the tribe's healer. She had seen her share of death and betrayal, and she trusted no outsiders, especially not white men. But this one was different. "You fight alone?" she asked in broken English. Clayton nodded. "I wasn't about to let cowards burn women and children." The chief, an old man with feathers in his hair, approached. He studied Clayton's weathered face. "You are old, but you fight like 20 men." Clayton grinned faintly. "Just stubborn, Chief. Stubborn and still breathing." That made a few of the younger warriors laugh, softly, cautiously. The tension began to melt. Nayeli, however, couldn't look away. There was something about this man. The way he stood straight despite the years, the way his eyes burned with a quiet kind of strength. She'd seen young warriors freeze in fear, but this cowboy hadn't hesitated. As night fell, the tribe invited him to rest near the fire. The women prepared food, venison stew with roasted corn, and the chief insisted he stay. "You saved my people," the old chief said. "You have the tribe's respect." Clayton bowed his head. "Didn't do it for respect, just couldn't ride past when someone needed help." When the others went to sleep, Nayeli stayed awake, tending to the wounded. The cowboy sat nearby, cleaning his rifle. The firelight flickered across his hands that were calloused, strong, yet careful. Finally, Nayeli spoke. "Why you help Apache? White men hate us." Clayton looked into the fire. "Not all white men. I fought in wars, seen hate from both sides. Doesn't make sense to me anymore. A life's a life. Doesn't matter what color the skin is." Her eyes softened. "You lost someone?" He nodded slowly. "My wife, long time ago. She was part Cherokee. Folks didn't like that much. I learned early. People fear what they don't understand." The night grew quiet again. Coyotes howled in the distance. The fire cracked softly. For a long time, Nayeli just watched him. The wrinkles around his eyes, the deep scars on his arms, the faded tattoo of a cavalry emblem on his shoulder. There was history written all over his skin. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but full of awe. "You are old, but still strong, still brave. You fight like thunder." Clayton chuckled. "Thunder don't care how old it is. It just keeps rolling." The next morning, the tribe prepared to move camp to a safer valley. Clayton offered to help repair their broken wagons and fences. He worked from dawn to dusk, lifting logs, fixing harnesses, cutting rope with steady hands. The young warriors who had mocked him at first began to follow his lead. Even the chief watched with quiet pride. At sunset, Nayeli stood watching from the edge of the camp. Her friend whispered beside her, "He is too old, Nayeli. Why do you look at him like that?" She didn't answer right away. Her heart felt something she couldn't explain, a mix of respect, admiration, and curiosity. Finally, she said softly, "Such a capable old cowboy deserves to pass on his genes." Her friend gasped, half laughing. "You want to bear his children?" Nayeli blushed, hiding her smile. "I only mean strength like his should not die with him." Clayton overheard just a little and smiled under his hat. He didn't turn, didn't say a word. But deep inside, he felt something warm for the first time in years. That night, under 1,000 stars, the old cowboy sat by the fire again, this time with the tribe's laughter echoing around him. For once, he wasn't just a wandering man with a rifle, he was part of something again. And as Nayeli passed by, placing a hand on his shoulder, he looked up and saw in her eyes a spark of destiny. The morning sun rose over the Apache Valley, golden light spilling across the hills like fire over stone. The tribe had begun to rebuild, and the old cowboy, Clayton Briggs, was now part of their rhythm. He helped the children learn to ride, taught the young warriors how to mend saddles and use their rifles with honor, not hate. They called him White Thunder now, for the sound of his gun and the wisdom in his voice. But among them all, it was Nayeli who stayed closest. Every morning she brought him food, roasted corn, beans or dried venison, and every night they sat near the fire, trading stories. She told him about her people, their sacred lands, and the spirits that watched over them. He told her about lost towns, gunfights, and the woman he once loved. Somewhere in those quiet nights, a gentle bond began to bloom, one that neither of them spoke about aloud, but both could feel. The shadow returns, but peace never stays long in the Wild West. One evening, a rider came fast into the camp shouting in Apache. The message spread like wildfire. The same band of raiders, twice as many this time, were coming back for revenge. Clayton's heart hardened. He knew these men, the kind that burned villages for fun and gold. He turned to the chief. "You got maybe 24 warriors?" The chief nodded grimly. "Less, some still wounded." Clayton looked toward the horizon. "Then we make the land our ally." He gathered the young men and began to draw in the dirt with a stick. His voice was calm, steady, like a teacher in battle's classroom. "We use the ridge line. 2 sharpshooters up here, another group in the creek bed. Let them think the camp's unguarded. Once they ride in, we trap 'em between fire and smoke." The warriors listened closely. Even the chief stepped back to let the cowboy lead. Nayeli stood beside him, spear in hand. "You fight again, White Thunder?" He gave her a small smile. "Guess thunder rolls twice, sweetheart." The Battle of the Valley. By sundown, the raiders arrived, 30 men with torches and whiskey courage. They laughed when they saw the camp quiet and dark. Then, from the ridge, a single gunshot echoed. One raider fell. Another followed. The men panicked, firing into the dark. Then came the smoke, thick and choking, rolling down from the hilltop like storm clouds. The Apaches rose from the shadows, with war cries that split the air. Clayton fired from behind a wagon, his rifle kicking like a mule. He shot fast, clean, never missing. A young raider charged at Nayeli, but before his bullet could find her, Clayton stepped in front, his old revolver roaring once more. The man dropped dead. Then another shot hit Clayton in the shoulder. He staggered, fell to one knee, but didn't stop firing. The battle raged for what felt like hours. When it was over, the raiders lay scattered across the valley. The tribe had won, but the cowboy was bleeding badly. Nayeli ran to him, dropping to her knees. No, stay with me." He chuckled through the pain. "You sound like my wife used to when I got shot." She tore her shawl and pressed it against his wound. Tears streaked her face. "You cannot die, White Thunder. You promised the children more stories. He smiled weakly. Reckon I told most of them already. Healing in heart for 3 days, Clayton drifted in and out of fever. Nayeli never left his side. She ground herbs, whispered prayers, and held his hand through the long nights. Sometimes he woke, muttering words from his past, names of lost friends, old towns, forgotten trails. And every time he opened his eyes, she was there, her face the first thing he saw. When he finally sat up, weak but alive, the entire tribe cheered. The chief came forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. You fought like one of us. You will always have a home here. Clayton's eyes found Nayeli's, and for the first time in years, he felt what home truly meant. That evening, as the fire burned low, Nayeli came to sit beside him. She brought a small pouch of beads and feathers, the symbol of family in her tribe. She spoke softly, her voice trembling. In our way, when a warrior saves the tribe and a woman's heart, the spirits say his blood must not fade. He looked at her gently. What are you saying, Nayeli? She met his eyes. Such a capable old cowboy deserves to pass on his genes. Clayton blinked, then laughed softly, the sound deep and warm. Darling, you got a funny way of proposing. She smiled shyly. Is that a yes? He reached out and took her hand. It's a forever, sweetheart. Years later, time passed like dust over the plains. Clayton never left the Apache Valley again. He built a small cabin near the river, raised horses, taught the young men how to ride and shoot, and grew old with Nayeli by his side. Their first son was born a year later, strong, dark-haired, with eyes like the open sky. They named him Kohana Briggs, half cowboy, half Apache. When the neighboring tribes came to visit, they would speak of the White Thunder who fought for the people, who chose peace over hate. Sometimes, when the campfire burned bright, Clayton would sit with the children gathered around him, telling tales of the Old West, how he once rode alone through storms, how he found a new life among those he was taught to fear, and when he looked at Nayeli, still fierce and beautiful, he'd wink and say, "Guess Thunder found a home after all." The final ride, many seasons later, when the cowboy's hair had turned pure white, he took one last ride into the hills. Nayeli stood at the doorway, watching him go. He rode slowly, smiling at the horizon. The wind carried whispers of the past, the guns, the dust, the laughter of his children. They found his horse grazing alone by sundown. Clayton lay under a cedar tree, his hat over his chest, his rifle resting beside him. The chief said, "He went to ride with the spirits." Nayeli just smiled through her tears. They buried him on the ridge where he first saved the tribe, facing the sunrise. Every morning the valley echoed with thunder, not from the sky, but from the hearts of those who remembered him. The old cowboy had passed, but his blood, his strength, lived on in his children and in the stories of the Apache people. And sometimes, when the desert wind rolled through the valley, Nayeli would whisper, "Such a capable old cowboy truly passed on his spirit."